Right, good morning everybody. The time is now 10 o'clock and this inquiry is open. So first of all, can everyone please turn off their mobile phones or set them to silent? And also turn off notifications on laptops and iPads if you're able to as well, please, just so that we don't have any distractions. Thank you. So hopefully everybody can hear me. We do have microphones, so hopefully there won't be any problems. But if anybody can't hear, then do please let me know and we'll do our best to rectify the situation. So my name is Helen Harkenhall. I am a Chartered Town Planner and have been appointed by the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities to hold this inquiry. So the inquiry is into an appeal made by Brandon Estates Limited for the demolition of the existing buildings and outline application with matters of access, layout, scale and appearance included for residential development, including means of access into the site from Rugby Road, the provision of open space and associated infrastructure, provision of sports pitch, erection of pavilion and formation of associated car park. And the site, of course, is the Coventry Stadium on Rugby Road. So first of all, can the Council please explain the emergency evacuation procedures, please?
Yes, Inspectorate, the instructions in front of you. Sorry,
I'll read them out. Yes, there is no fire drill scheduled today. So if the fire alarm sounds, please can we ask everyone then to make their way down to the main staircase, out of the main doors of the Town Hall and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the Council will then give instructions when it's safe to re-enter the building. So I hope that's clear. Are there any other housekeeping matters the Council wishes to make us aware?
Yes, thank you. Just to make everyone aware, the event is being live streamed. In order for people to hear the stream, microphones need to be pressed. That will pick up anything. So if once you have finished speaking, if people would like to then unpress the microphone, then that will be impertinent. So I think there is a microphone possibly pressed over on that side of the room at the moment as I speak, because it's coming up on the camera. So if that could be turned off, please. No?
Okay. There might be a laptop on top of a turning on switch.
There we go.
I've already experienced it once this morning.
So it's just to remind people, yes, if they can please turn their mics off when they finish speaking, please. The other thing to do is to say the rooms that have been allocated to you, if you can please keep them clear at the end of the night, or just if you have got boxes, just stack them to one side because those rooms are in use some evenings by councillors. If you haven't already seen for members of the party that are in the chamber, there is water over in the far hand side as well of the room if they need it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So there are a number of formalities I need to go through before we start today. First of all, I need to take the names of those who wish to speak during the inquiry. So first of all, I'm going to start with the appellant. So that's Mr. Goatley.
Ma'am, good morning. It's Peter Goatley, which is Goatley, King's Counsel, from number 5 Chambers. I am assisted by Leanne Buckley-Thompson, also of Council, and we are instructed by DPP Planning of Cardiff on behalf of the appellant. Ma'am, I've provided you with a list of appearances just to the left of your laptop, and we'll be calling Matthew Chard, Director of Landscape Planning at Stantec in respect of the Greenbelt matters, Mr. John Eady, who's at Knight, Kavanagh and Page in respect of speedway use and the need for the proposed sports pitch, Mr. Clark Osborne of Gaming International in respect of speedway operational matters, Mr. James Stacey at Tetlow King Planning in respect of affordable housing, and Mr. Gareth Hooper of DPP Planning in respect of planning matters. Ma'am, I know that some of those can be dealt with by round table session, so they won't be called in the conventional manner, but those are the team sheet, which should accord with the proofs of evidence that you've already received from us.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Goatley. Yes, I have all that. So who speaks for the council, please? I think it's Mr. Richards.
Yes, good morning, Madam. I do. My name is Hugh Richards, Hugh Richards, of Council, also of number 5 Chambers. and I shall be instructed by Rugby Borough Council. I shall be calling two witnesses, Mr Neil Allen, who deals with sports matters, and Mr Gary Stevens, who deals with planning matters. My and their names and post-nominal letters are on my opening statement, so that I've not got a separate appearances list.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr Richards. So then who speaks for the Rule 6 party? That's the Save Coventry Stadium party.
Good morning, Madam. I do. My name is Richard Humphreys, Humphrys, King's Counsel, also of Number 5 Chambers. And I'm instructed by Mr David Carter, who sits immediately to my left, on behalf of the Save Coventry Speedway and Stocks campaign group on a public access basis. I shall be calling three witnesses. First, Mr David Carter, Chartered Town Planner, on the various issues of planning, sports issues, greenbelt and housing. And then, secondly, Mr Matt Ford, a speedway promoter. Thirdly, Mr Warren Hunter, a potential site purchaser. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr Humphreys. So I also need to make a note of anybody else who wishes to speak at the inquiry. And I have four persons that I am aware of, and they are Councillor Anthony Gillius. Have we got Councillor? Thank you. Good morning to you. Mr Morris. Do we have Mr Morris? Yeah, up there. Good morning to you. Mr Rees. I believe there's a problem with Mr Rees. He's not very well.
Yes, last night we heard about 7 o'clock last night that Mr Rees has tested positive for COVID. As of this moment, clearly it would be totally inappropriate for him to come. I suggest that we see how how matters progress, to see whether he could come next week if he's well enough. If he can't, then we can consider whether we treat his evidence as written material or whatever. Thank you.
That's absolutely fine, Mr Humphreys. If he is well enough, then we'll find him a slot next week. Or, as you said, a third party could read a statement for us, or we could take it as read, but we'll come to that if we need to next week. All right, thank you. I also have Mr Hire as well on my list of people who are wishing to speak. Do we have Mr Hire here? No? Or perhaps he might turn up later and we'll just wait and see. Okay.
Apparently he's turning up around 10:30, Ma'am.
Oh, right, that's helpful, thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely fine, thank you. So is anyone from the press present? Good morning to you. Just a reminder, the council already mentioned we are being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel, so just the normal sort of caveats around that, please. And does anybody else intend to film or record the event? Yes. Can you just explain what you intend to do, please?
Yeah, Andy Mitchell, local device.
Okay then. Does anybody have any objection to the event being recorded by the press?
The benefit of the live stream is that the live stream is publicly available, and I think it is recorded or recorded, so consequently it is accessible to all parties to know essentially what happens to it. The difficulty of anything which is otherwise recorded by whatever means and is not otherwise available to the principal parties for that is a little more problematic in terms of what then happens with it. So I think that would be a concern. I understand that for some aspects of seeking to carry out reporting for private use, those who are seeking to do the reporting might wish to have access to that if for whatever reason they don't have access to the YouTube channel. But I have to say, I think I lay down a caveat, in respect of that.
Okay, thank you, Mr Goatley. Anybody else have any concerns or comments, Mr Richards?
I would express the same concerns over the evidence sessions. If, on the other hand, a broadcaster wanted a snippet of what I said in opening to use today, rather than wait for the recording on the YouTube channel, then I wouldn't have any objection to what I say in opening to be recorded and made available for the journalists today. But otherwise, like my learned friend, I think we should simply rely on the material that's uploaded on the YouTube channel.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask the gentleman over there at the press, would it be acceptable just to rely on the YouTube channel? If you recorded just this morning's opening statements, it might assist you for doing any copy today. Would that be acceptable to you?
Ideally not, no, because obviously...
I understand your issue in terms of the immediacy of being able to report. Certainly there is a time lag from the events here being recorded and kept. Can I just ask the council, how long is the recording kept, and what's the intention with the recording?
I can double check, but they normally stay on our YouTube channel for the foreseeable future, so they should be on there for at least a month, if not longer.
Okay, thank you. I think my preference would be that, yes, you may record the opening statements. That gives you the broad indication of the overall cases of all the parties, which might assist you today, and then following that, just rely on the YouTube channel. Okay, all right, thank you. Right, notification letters. I have 4 copies of the council's letters of notification. Firstly, of the appeal, and then secondly, confirming the date, time and location of this inquiry, together with a list of all those that have been notified. So all that appears to be in order. Now, I've seen copies of all the representations, both to the original application and to the appeal, and I've read those and will take those into account.
Madam, may I just interrupt on that point? You mentioned you've seen all the representations made on the application, which would have been in 2018 and then again in 2021. Those, as I understand it, are not accessible to the general public on the council website. Obviously, I'm perfectly happy for you to see them, but if you're seeing them, I really ought to be able to see them as well, because I've seen now the representations on the appeal, but I do think I ought, if I may, I ought to be able to, if they need to be redacted so that I can't see addresses or personal details, I fully understand that, but I think it's a matter of fairness. In case there's a factual matter which is put before you, which I don't have an opportunity to correct if it's inaccurate or comment on, I'm not inviting extra work for myself, but I think in fairness to my clients, I ought to, if I can raise that. If there may be another point of view which I haven't taken into account, but I raise it at this moment, if I may.
That's helpful, thank you, Mr Humphreys. Just to be clear what I have seen, the council submitted to the Planning Inspectorate copies of all their consultation responses, which I have seen. I have seen all the responses to the appeal notification, and I can't remember how many of those, there are a lot. I haven't seen the full 1,400 or so representations to the 2018 original application. I think basically there'd be too many of those anyway, I think. I'm not sure whether they are available or whether they would even be helpful, in that a lot of the issues I think have been raised anyway or repeated in other representations, so I'm not sure there'd be anything new in any of that information. Would the council like to comment?
Yes, you've only seen the representations on the current application, and there were quite a number of them, as I recall. You have seen an unredacted version. If we are to make them more widely available, then I think they will have to be redacted, and that is going to be a mammoth task, which is why they are not presently uploaded anywhere.
But yeah, I do take the point. You are correct. I have seen them unredacted, so I do know names and addresses attributable to those responses and petitions with signatures on, which clearly would have to be redacted anyway. Press
the wrong button. I don't wish to be a thorn on anyone's side and happy to take a proportionate approach. May I leave it on this basis at the moment? If, in the course of the inquiry, somebody raises, oh, here's a representation, and you suddenly think, actually, that's, I haven't seen that elsewhere. If you could just alert us, then we have the opportunity. I don't want you to feel in a few months' time, oh gosh, I've got material here which I know the third parties wouldn't have seen. So I raise this as a point. Let's hope it doesn't. Chancellor, in respect of the number of representations on the appeal, I counted it as 193. I may have missed one or two.
I think that's probably a fair guesstimate. Yes, it is around 200-ish. Yep. Yes.
Can I suggest that the three of us have a chat at a convenient coffee break, or even while you're out on site, and try and come up with a sensible solution?
That's very helpful, thank you, Mr. Richards. Yes, but I think, as Mr. Humphrey says, if anything specific is raised by any party, then fair enough, then everyone would need to have sight of that. But apart from that...
And I'm thinking, for example, he might want to see the representations of those who live closest to the site, for example.
I'm happy for you to have a conversation separately about that and agree a way forward. Yeah, you can tell me that, Mr. Goatley.
Yes, thank you. I'm content with that.
Right, so proofs of evidence. Clearly I've seen all the proof of evidence from all the parties, as well as the rebuttal proofs from the appellant and the Rule 6 party, the Save Coventry Stadium and Stocks group. So I've read all those, and I will be taking those obviously into account. And I will take them largely as read, but clearly in evidence in chief, parties will be going through those and pointing out individual aspects of that. Are there any spare copies for any members of the public or interested parties that may wish to see those?
For our part, not paper copies, no.
No, we're trying to go paperless, and therefore they are freely available on the website at core document 16, and we would encourage people to look at them there.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. Right, I also have statements of common ground between the appellant and the council, and also between the appellant and Save Coventry Stadium and Stocks party. Now they set out the areas of agreement and disagreement on the issues that are raised by this appeal. Can I just check one thing, and that is in relation to the education contribution? That was potentially an issue early on. Has that now been resolved?
Yes, as one sentence in my opening will confirm to you.
That's fine, thank you, just so I'm clear. Okay then. So the plans before me, they are set out in the Statements of Common Ground. They are actually listed in one of the draft conditions in there. I'm not going to go through them because it's a very long list. But I am going to assume that they are agreed. Before today's event, I did query some of the references, the revision numbers, just to check that they are correct. And the council have come back to me yesterday, I think it was, to say they have checked through everything. They found one or two errors, found some revisions that weren't quite right on the website, and have been uploaded so that we have a full correct set. I think that was my problem, really. I had various revision numbers and I couldn't quite locate the plans in various different locations, but I think that's been resolved now, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, Mr. Richards, were you going to say something? Turn myself off at the moment. No?
Right, yes. Yesterday you should have had new version of Condition 5, both clean and with yellow highlighting. That's now the definitive list, so far as the council is concerned, unless anybody tells us anything to the contrary.
Yes, I do have that. Yes, I have seen that yesterday. Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, Mr. Goatley.
Pardon, it's just been brought to my attention there is someone in the public gallery whose their hand raised. May wish to bring something to your attention.
Sorry, thank you for that. Yes.
Sorry, can I just bring it to your attention that I'm Alexandra and I'm from the Wilkes Partnership. We act for the NHS Trust, and just by way of background, it was confirmed to us that our request was still compliant. We were informed on Friday by the council that they no longer consider it still compliant. So we are taking instructions from our client, and we do wish to assist the inquiry at the Section 106 roundtable discussion. But as you understand,
Right, no, okay, that's helpful, thank you. I am aware of that. The council has made me aware that you wish to join us when we start discussing the SIL requirements and the 106 agreement, and in particular the contribution to NHS matters and projects. So I am happy for you to attend that session. Obviously, you know, I think you keep an eye on the timetable. It's not until next week, but I'm quite happy for you to attend that if you wish to. Yeah, thank you.
Madam, on documents, may I just raise one other matter with the core document list? At CD03, we have listed under the title of new plans and documents submitted with the appeal. Certainly in the version I had, 8 documents. I'm not sure I've got the most recent core document list, but that's good enough for the moment. The title is submitted with the appeal. I think, though I'm happy to be corrected, they were all submitted after the appeal had been lodged. I don't believe they were submitted with the appeal, so they're new documents since the appeal was lodged. May I just confirm that, or if somebody needs to take instructions? But it's slightly misleading, or inadvertently misleading description of that. I think they're documents that are more recent than even the appeal.
Can I ask the council, are you able to clarify that, Mr Richards, please?
I'm just looking for the date the appeal was lodged, because some of the documents in CD03 have dates beside them, and that will give us a ready answer.
Yeah, so they are all documents that were submitted by the appellant with the appeal, except for the 3G feasibility study, which was submitted at a later date, but otherwise they were all submitted on the submission of the appeal. So we may want to rename CD03.
Okay, can I leave that with you to have a look at then?
Yeah, that's fine.
Just to clarify that matter. Thank you. Okay. Right. Now just a few words now about procedure and what we're going to do during the next 7-8 days or so. So I've issued a draft programme for the event. That was revised yesterday, very slightly, just reordering witnesses for the Rule 6 party because of availability, but essentially it is unchanged. In summary, when I conclude my opening remarks this morning, I will identify the main issues in this case and then invite the appellant, the council and the Rule 6 party to make a brief opening statement. Those will be around 10-15 minutes long or so, just to help everyone understand the main arguments from all the parties. Following that, it will be helpful to hear from any local residents or other industry parties opposing the proposals. Those who give evidence will normally be expected to answer questions on their evidence from the appellant's advocate and possibly also from myself. I've already gone through persons that I am aware of that wish to speak today. So this afternoon we intend to undertake our site visit. It's not the best day in terms of weather, but we have to make the best of it. So I will need to be accompanied by all parties as I will be entering onto private land, and we'll make arrangements for that later on this morning. So tomorrow we're going to start off with our roundtable discussion on Greenbelt matters. Then following on from that, I will invite the council to present their case against the proposal in relation to sports issues and viability. The appellant's advocate will then have an opportunity to cross-examine the witness, and the council's advocate may then put some questions in re-examination. So following the same format, I will then ask the Rule 6 party, the Safe Coventry Stadium Stocks party, to present their sports issues viability evidence, and then it will be the appellant's turn. I intend to hold a roundtable on affordable housing matters. Then following that, the parties will each present their planning evidence. So when I've heard all the evidence, I will then have a roundtable discussion to look at the planning obligation and conditions should the appeal be allowed. Now, this is standard procedure. It may seem that I have made my mind up, but I can certainly assure parties that I haven't at this stage. What that will do is just provide me with all the information I need should I allow the appeal. Now, I have a draft planning obligation, which the appellant, I'm sure, is aware, and will need a signed and dated version at some point, preferably at the end of the inquiry, if possible, but alternatively, we'll agree a time to enable you to do that post the event. So I may ask questions at any stage in the proceedings from any parties that are giving evidence. I'm not inviting any applications for costs, but if anyone intends to make such an application, then that must need to be done here before I formally close the inquiry. And I think all advocates know that we're very helpful if that's in writing, please. So time estimates, the inquiry is scheduled for 8 days. It may be that we are able to complete it in slightly less than that, but we'll just see how things go. I will break for lunch every day around 1 o'clock for about an hour, with short breaks in the morning and the afternoon at appropriate times in the proceedings. Aim to finish at around about 5 o'clock each day, though if we are in the middle of something, I will extend that later into the evening slightly. But tomorrow, I believe there is an issue with this building, with this room being used for a council meeting, so we do need to be finished by 5 o'clock tomorrow and clear the room. So, the council has set up a dedicated web page which provides all the proofs and the core documents that relate to the appeal. All documents and evidence should already have been submitted to me, but I'll just ask the parties, is there anything at this stage that you wish to submit? Can I turn to the council, please, Mr. Richards? Anything from your team?
No, not from us, thank you.
Mr. Humphreys? Mr. Goatley?
No, thank you, Mum.
Okay, good, thank you very much. So, the main issues that relate to this appeal, I'll just run through them briefly. I think the parties are aware of these already. First of all, whether the proposed development forms inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, the effect on openness and Greenbelt purposes, whether the stadium is surplus to requirements having regard to national or local planning policies, whether it is financially viable to reinstate the Speedway Stadium, whether there is an identified need for the alternative sports provision proposed, whether the benefits of the alternative sports provision outweigh the loss of the former Speedway use, other benefits of the proposal, including the delivery of new market and affordable housing, and then finally, the overall planning balance, which effectively, for those that don't understand what that is, that's weighing up all the harm versus the benefits, effectively. So that concludes my opening remarks this morning. Can I just ask all parties anything further from anybody in terms of procedure, comments, questions at this stage? Mr. Humphreys.
Madam, just to say, I've been alerted to the fact that upstairs there may be more individuals who wish to speak, or certainly mentioned to you that they'd like to speak at some point. So I don't know quite who they are, but if you might be appropriate.
Just as a brief, and I have asked already if anyone wishes to speak, and I have a list of some interested parties. If anybody else does wish to speak, either this morning or at an alternative point during our event, then can you just please let me know, and then we'll do our best to slot you in at an appropriate time. I just need to take your name and understand your interest in the case, that's all. So if anybody wishes to do that, then just please let me know at an appropriate time. Mr. Richards.
I've had an email from Councillor Mistry, M-I-S-T-R-Y, but I don't know whether he's up in the gallery or whether he's going to attend later. But that's the only other person I've been notified about.
Well, I'm not sure he's here today. It doesn't look like he is. But if he comes at another time during the event, then we'll address it at the time and give him the opportunity to speak. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from anybody before we start?
Yes, there is one other thing. You will have seen in the evidence for the affordable housing that the figures given by the appellant's witness based on a response to a Freedom of Information request in March differ from the figure given by Mr. Stevens, who got his instructions just before submitting his proof. I've asked why there is such a discrepancy. And there is a note being prepared, and a housing officer will attend the round table if you will allow that to assist with the up-to-date position. I just wanted to alert my learned friend because I failed to do so quietly before the inquiry opened this morning, and I had intended to, but I will give him further and better particulars at the short break.
Okay, thank you, Mr Richards. That is helpful, actually, to have a note being prepared, and I'm quite happy for a council officer in the Housing Department to appear if that helps us. Can I just ask, though, that any note being prepared, that's circulated well in advance of the roundtable session?
Yes.
So that all parties have time to read it and assimilate it. Thank you. Mr Goatley.
Ma'am, before it does go into wider currency, I'd quite like to see that and to see what it's saying and why, certainly before you get to see it, Ma'am.
I'll certainly do that.
Fine, I'm happy for that. Just as I said, just myself included, we just need a little bit of time to review it whenever it's ready to be looked at. So thank you for that. Anything else from you? No. Thank you very much, everybody. In that case, then, that concludes my opening remarks. So I then ask the appellant's advocate to make a short opening statement. Thank you. Mr Goatley, when you're ready.
Ma'am, thank you. These are the opening submissions on behalf of the appellant. This is an appeal made by Brandon Estates following the council's decision to refuse an application for demolition of existing buildings and outline planning permission with matters of access, layout, scale and appearance included for a residential development, use class C3, including means of access into the site from Rugby Road, provision of open space and associated infrastructure and provision of a sports pitch, erection of a pavilion and formation of associated car park at land at Coventry Stadium, Rugby Road, Coventry. There was one reason for refusing planning permission. During the case management conference on the 17th of July, Mum, you distilled the main issues which you have just set out, and I'm not proposing to read those further, having done so. But with regard to the appropriate contribution to education, that being a matter which is otherwise agreed, then it may well be that item 7 does not need to delay us unduly. We'll deal briefly with each of the points at this stage. First of all, whether the proposed development forms inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, the effect on Greenbelt purposes and openness. The site lies to the northeast of Rugby Road, between Gossett Lane to the northwest and northeast, and Speedway Lane to the southeast, and it's surrounded by residential development to the immediate west, east and south, and woodland to the north. The existing development consists of a racetrack, spectator stands and outbuildings with substantial areas of hard standing in connection with the former Brandon Stadium. Policy GP2 sets out the settlement hierarchy of the borough and shows the site as green belt, where the policy states new development will be resisted only when national policy on green belt allows will development be permitted. The NPPF sets out the 5 purposes of the green belt at paragraph 138, and Mr. Chard will give evidence explaining how, though the site is located within the defined green belt, the proposed development would not constitute inappropriate development nor result in harm. It would plainly be the redevelopment of previously developed land, meeting that exception at paragraph 149G of the NPPF bites. The site comprises 10.86 hectares of previously developed land, or PDL, and that was accepted and noted within the officer's report, and that the site has a very limited contribution to the purposes of the Greenbelt. Its existing buildings are utilitarian, dilapidated, and in a deteriorating condition, creating a detracting influence. The developed nature of the site, its enclosed boundaries, and the existing residential development within the immediate setting result in it having a much closer relationship with the existing settlement edge than the more rural countryside beyond the woodland to the north. The level of enclosure and existing development within the site result in there already being development visible from immediate views. Ma'am, you'll note that there are a number of footnotes which are applied within this particular statement, which actually gives a number of references as to where a number of those propositions are derived from, including, among other things, the officer's report and also some of the evidence. Inevitably, there would be a change to the openness from the proposed development by definition, but as the officer's report notes, it would not have a greater impact on the openness of the greenbelt than currently exists. Therefore, the proposal complies with paragraph 149 of the NPPF. There would be no very significant intensification of built development, nor would it result in large-scale urbanisation within the countryside. The potential harm to the greenbelt is mitigated through a well-considered design rationale and high-quality scheme within a site that provides very little towards the contribution of greenbelt purposes. Large, linear, monolithic buildings presently in situ would be removed and replaced. The proposed development has been designed to respond to the character and settlement pattern and visual amenity, and the proposed footprint of the proposed built form will be smaller than the existing stadium, with the built form being of a domestic scale. The residential built form will be located largely within the eastern extent of the site, in and around the existing location of the existing stadium footprint. The potential effects will be highly localised and partly mitigated by the sensitive design approach. Potential harm to openness is mitigated as much as possible, including enhanced access to footpaths, with the potential harm to visual openness limited as a result of the existing level of enclosure to the appeal site. There is a potential for significant benefits arising from the enhanced access to and the quality of land remaining within the greenbelt. The proposed development will be embedded within a substantial area of green infrastructure, set back from the site boundaries to provide a green collar around it, acting as a buffer to the existing adjacent properties, providing a sympathetic and characteristic transition between the built local and wider countryside to the north and the southeast. The proposed open space and landscape structural planting include a network of footpaths and cycleways that will provide enhanced connectivity and permeability to the existing public rights-of-way network and roads within the vicinity. The positive outward-facing development will provide views along corridors throughout the scheme to provide perceptual linkage with wider landscape and mitigate loss of visual openness. Next, whether the stadium is surplus to requirements having regard to national and local planning policies. Paragraph 99A of the NPPF requires the demonstration that the buildings or land are surplus to requirements. Mr. Eady and Mr. Osborne will give evidence, as will Mr. Hooper, insofar as related to planning matters, that this is plainly the case. It's clear that the viability of Speedway as a sport as a whole is severely challenged, the impact of which is that the need for the former stadium to be retained does not exist. The appeal site has not fulfilled a role for motorsport for 7 years, in which time the professional Speedway team which occupied the site has been disbanded, and the number of professional Speedway teams and resultant fixtures has reduced. The independent review of the sports planning case undertaken by YWG in September 2019 highlights that motorsport participation has been in decline nationally. Not only have the numbers of participants in Speedway fallen, but also the number of spectators. Mr. Osborne and Mr. Eady will give evidence noting the decline, which has continued further still since the WYG report. Though the former stadium has not hosted a Speedway event since 2016, any need that might remain can be met from the several tracks which remain. There are no accessibility standards in motorsport, as acknowledged in the 2019 WYG report. There are a number of tracks at some distance. The sport has continued and evolved without the appeal site. The history and the previous fan base is not enough justification. Next, whether it is financially viable to reinstate the Speedway Stadium. The WYG report concludes that the former stadium may struggle to be delivered viably in its current state, and given the ownership would be difficult to deliver. It goes on to state, this is different, however, from whether a new stadium operated under a new model could potentially become operationally viable. However, even that is overly optimistic. Mr. Osborne will give evidence as to the feasibility of the development and the operation of speedway racing at Coventry Stadium, concluding that there is no financial justification for the development of speedway racing facilities, and, in the absence of a substantial grant of funds for the development of facilities and the subsidy of operation costs, the operation of speedway racing at Coventry Stadium is not feasible at any level. A structural condition report of the former stadium, conducted by Farrow Walsh Consulting in April 2023, confirms significant concerns regarding the condition of the former stadium, which could not host any form of events without demolition and significant reinstatement. The cost report, prepared by international cost consultants Ryder, Levitt, Bucknell, provides a detailed breakdown of the cost for the demolition, refurbishment and construction required to restore the stadium back to a level where it could host the same level of activity as it did at the point of closure in 2016. The total of the works would be some £13.7 million. The cost of reinstating the stadium to serve the previous use is not viable, and the operating costs are so high relative to the income that even if the stadium were reinstated, it could not operate on a financially stable basis, longer term, without subsidy. This is in the wider context of the operational costs of Speedway, which means that the longer-term outlook for Speedway as a sport looks at best uncertain. More teams have indicated that they will not be competing next season due to commercial constraints, and there is fan speculation of the need for the Premiership and Championship divisions to consolidate in order to maintain the required number of teams, riders and fixtures to fulfil their contractual obligations with broadcasters. Planning permission would be required to demolish and reinstate the former stadium, in part or in whole. Mr. Hooper will explain why he does not consider that a positive outcome will be forthcoming. Moreover, even if consent were granted, it would likely be subject to conditions seeking to ensure that the operation of the site respected the amenity of the neighbouring residents, limiting the operation of the stadium and adding significantly to the cost of the track. A viable future for the stadium would need to rely on alternative uses. Mr. Osborne will also give evidence as to the alternative uses he has considered, which can typically be combined with speedway tracks to promote better viability. However, none would assist in this case. Similarly, Mr. Hooper has considered alternate uses in planning terms, but as will be clear from his evidence, they are unlikely. It's clear that the Council do not have any plans for how the stadium could be brought back into use, and notably they do not intend to present any evidence of their own at the appeal in relation to the future viability of the stadium. Next, whether there is an identified need for the alternative sports provision proposed. The appeal proposal includes the provision of a 3G pitch and associated pavilion, which will be available for use by the community under a community use agreement. There is a clearly identified need for the same, as will explain through the evidence of Mr. Eadie by reference to the Knight, Kavanagh and Page, or KKP, 3G feasibility study. The feasibility study identifies a clear need for a 3G pitch plus ancillary facilities in the local area within which the Brandon Stadium is located. There is a thoroughly evidenced 3G pitch shortfall in the locality based on football training requirements. Both the new Coventry PPS and the KKB study identify that there's a shortfall of 3G provision across the two authorities, resulting in a clear identified need for new full-size 3G pitches to be established, with Brandon Stadium presenting an opportunity for this to be achieved. Moreover, there is sufficient team-based demand from large local clubs and sky blues in the community to ensure a full programme of use of the proposed facility. The feasibility study identified potential demand from 103 teams, increasing to 112 teams, subject to management arrangements, which is more than sufficient, particularly considering the FA's model for determining the number of 3G pitches required, and estimates that 38 football teams can be accommodated on one full-size pitch for training purposes, such that it can be considered that around 38 teams need to be willing to access a 3G pitch for regular training activity to justify development and ensure financial sustainability. Sky Blues in the community have also expressed an interest in accessing the proposed facility, and it runs various Football Association initiatives, feeding into the conclusion that sufficient demand has been identified to warrant the development, and no alternative sporting options have been identified that are required or would meet as much of a need. The feasibility report demonstrates any such pitch, including the proposed pavilion, would be a viable proposition. The evidence demonstrates that the 5-year business plan confirms that the income generated by the pitch would enable it to remain viable and operational in the long term. As agreed by the Council in recommending the application for approval, the proposed 3G pitch should be afforded substantial weight. Next, whether the benefits of the alternative sports provision outweigh the loss of the former speedway use. It's very clear the benefits of alternative sports benefits that the alternative sports provision would bring outweigh the loss of the former speedway use, such that the proposed development is in accordance with paragraph 99 of the MPPF criterion C and bullet point 3 of policy HS4C of the local plan. That's why, in recommending the planning application for approval, the Council's officers determined that the benefits associated with the proposals outweighed any conflict with national and local planning policy. The former stadium has not provided any economic benefits to the local community since 2016 and offers very little support to economic growth and productivity. The only economic benefit the site is currently generating is the £100,000 per annum cost the appellant is paying to maintain and provide security on site. Though SCS suggests that very significant economic benefits would have continued had the speedway not departed from the site, that's simply not realistic. Mr. Osborne will give evidence of the typical expenditure of a speedway operation, making clear that seeking speedway racing promotion at Brandon at any level is not viable. It's clear that the expenditure generated by the former speedway use is significantly lower than the appeal proposals would generate in construction and operation. Conversely, the appeal proposals will result in significant economic benefits in construction and operation, which will be felt locally and in accordance with paragraph 81 of the NPPF should be afforded significant or substantial weight as agreed by the Council in recommending the application for approval. The much needed 3G pitch and associated pavilion will create a community facility, but it will also deliver an alternative to the former stadium neighbourhood plan defined community facility, secured through a community use agreement, which will be accessed and used by the local community in which it is sited. As such, the appeal proposals would accord with policies HS3 and HS4 of the local plan and with neighbourhood plan policy LF1. Other benefits of the proposal including the delivery of market and affordable housing. There are a number of other significant benefits that the proposal will bring. The appeal proposals will result in the delivery of 124 new homes, with a mix that the Council considers to be acceptable. Though the Council are able to demonstrate the required 5-year housing land supply, this is a minimum rather than a maximum requirement, and the Government is clear through paragraph 60 of the NPPF as to the need to support the Government's objective of significantly boosting the supply of homes. Small and medium-sized sites such as this can make an important contribution to meeting the housing requirement of an area that are often built out relatively quickly. Mr. Stacey will give evidence as to the need for affordable housing across Rugby Borough. Market signals indicate a worsening trend in affordability in the borough relative to both the West Midlands region and England as a whole, this being an authority which, in his view, is facing serious and worsening affordability pressures, and one through which urgent action must be taken to deliver more affordable homes. The provision of 25 affordable homes in accordance with Local Plan Policy H3 will make a substantial contribution which should be afforded substantial weight. It cannot be said that there is no need for additional homes, especially when the contribution that the affordable housing will provide to meet the clear need that exists for that form of housing. There will be significant social and environmental enhancements. In addition to the above, the appeal site is currently not accessible to the public. Not only will the site be brought back into beneficial use, but the proposals will also provide a significant amount of open space, with the potential to create 370% more open space on site than the policy requirement, and which can be accessed by the public. This open space, including a large area to the north of the site to adjoin the existing woodland, will be accessible by the public, creating significant benefit whilst benefiting the openness of the greenbelt. Improvements to links from the site to existing public rights of way outside the site will also be secured via a financial contribution, thereby promoting increased usage. The site is currently characterised by crumbling structures and a derelict appearance. Significant biodiversity net gain will establish coherent ecological networks that are more resilient to current and future pressures than the current use, assisted by a comprehensive scheme of landscaping. And as agreed by the LPA in recommending the application for approval, these benefits hold substantial weight. Whether the proposed development makes an appropriate contribution to education, as we heard a few moments ago, a draft Section 106 agreement has been reached between the Council and the appellant, which reflects a package of contributions necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to the development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind. A blue pencil clause is included in the agreement in order that you can strike out any provisions effectively which you do not consider to be compliant with Regulation 122 of the Civil Regulations. As to the overall planning balance and the conclusion we invite you to reach, critically, the appeal proposals will deliver 124 dwellings, including much-needed affordable properties, in a suitable location and a sustainable location, whilst providing an alternative sports and community facility, significant public open space, biodiversity net gain, and significant economic benefits. And as such, the significant benefits are consistent with the objectives of national, local, and neighbourhood plans. Set against even the alleged harm, it's clear that the benefits of the development are not demonstrably outweighed, and it's accordingly for these reasons, you'll be respectfully invited in due course to allow the appeal. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Goatley. Right, I will now then turn to the Council. Mr. Richards, if you'd like to give your opening statement, please. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So when you're ready, Mr. Richards, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. This is an appeal against the refusal of an outline application, but only landscape is a reserved matter. However, the materials submitted in respect of the proposed 3G pitch and pavilion clubhouse are apparently also to be regarded as illustrative, but their location is fixed, with the submission of details required under conditions. The Council takes no procedural point on this. It just wants everyone to be clear at the outset of the inquiry what is being considered in detail and what is not. The site is previously developed land for the purposes of local and national planning policy. It was sold to Investin Brandon Limited in 2015 and quickly transferred to Brandon Estates Limited, the appellant. It was last in use for racing in late 2016. A synopsis of the factual history since then is to be found in Mr. Hooper's Appendix 1 and in the evidence and material submitted by the Rule 6 party, Save Coventry Speedway and Stocks Campaign Group, which we are all, I think, calling SCS. What occurred when is less controversial than why it occurred. The application was reported to Planning Committee on the 9th of November 2022 with an officer recommendation for approval. However, the committee, as it was entitled to do, disagreed. The application was refused by notice issued on the 16th of November 2023 for the following reasons. Before I go to those, can I just pause and make one point that arises out of the opening of My Learned Friend? He seems to use the term the council and the council's officers interchangeably, so that he will say, for example, the council agreed that ... when what he means is that's what the council's committee was told by the officers. On other occasions, he does say the council agreed that, and it's perfectly clear that, when the council signs the statement of common ground, that's the council talking. But it will be important as we go through this inquiry to be clear that the decision of the council was that of its committee, not the recommendation of its officers. And then at the top of the second page, I set out the reason for refusal, which you will be familiar with. The development plan comprises the Rugby Borough Local Plan, 2011 to 31, and the Brandon and Bretford Neighbourhood Plan, both adopted or made in June of 2019. The key policies in this appeal are, firstly, Local Plan Policy GP2. The site is located outside the settlement boundary of Brandon and is in the Greenbelt, where new development is only acceptable where National Greenbelt policy indicates some support. Paragraph 149 of the NPPF supports the redevelopment of previously developed land in the Greenbelt and which would not have a greater impact on the openness than the existing position and where it will not cause substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. Like Local Plan Policy HS4C, like paragraph 99 of the NPPF, this provides that sports buildings and land should not be built on unless an assessment has been undertaken to clearly show it is surplus to requirements, or the loss resulting from the development would be replaced by equivalent or better provision, or the development is for alternative sports and recreation provision, the needs for which clearly outweigh the loss of the current or former use. And then lastly, Neighbourhood Plan Policy LF1. This states that proposals that would diminish or remove a community facility, such as the presently closed stadium, will be required to demonstrate that the facility is no longer needed or viable, and that there is no realistic prospect of viability being improved with either the current or other community uses. It goes on to state that new community uses will be supported. The plans for approval are listed in Draft Condition 5. 124 dwellings are shown, not up to 137 as originally proposed. They comprise a mixture of housing types, sizes and tenures, with 20% of them being affordable housing. The dwellings are to be located in the eastern section of the site and will comprise 34 two-bedroom dwellings, 65 three-bedroomed and 25 four-bedroom dwellings. The proposed dwellings are all two-storey and a mix of detached, semi-detached and terraced. They will feature a range of materials, brick and render, and features such as canopy porches and bay windows. Some of the dwellings have integrated garages, while others have single, detached and double garages. Illustrative plans. Some plans in Draft Condition 5 can only be illustrative. For example, the Landscape Master Plan and the Sports Pitch and Car Park Concept Plan. A statement of common ground with the Planning Authority has been signed and with SCS. Case management of this appeal has indicated a number of main issues around which the inquiry procedure has been structured. The Council's position on each of them is briefly as follows. First, main issue 1, whether the proposed development forms inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, the effect on openness and Greenbelt purposes. This is essentially a matter of planning judgment. In this instance, the Council's officers and Mr. Stevens, its planning witness, have reached the same judgment as the appellant's team. But that is not conclusive. Mr. Carter for SCS reaches a contrary judgment, which you, madam, may or may not agree with. Secondly, main issue 2, whether the stadium is surplus to requirements having regard to national and local planning policies. National policy in NPPF paragraph 99A is quite clear. The stadium site should not be redeveloped unless the appellant clearly shows it is surplus to requirements. In this context, the Council's case is that Sport England's Assessing Needs and Opportunities Guide, 2014, is an important how-to-do guide, and if followed, will produce a robust and up-to-date assessment of need. The Council will show it has not been followed. The appellant also confuses the required assessment with consideration of viability issues, which are not relevant to the surplus issue. Local Plan Policy HS4C's first exception mirrors NPPF paragraph 99A. Main issue 3, whether it's financially viable to reinstate the Speedway Stadium. This issue goes to Neighbourhood Plan Policy LF1 and is also relevant under main issue 5. The Council has not produced viability evidence of its own, but has had regard to that submitted by the appellant and SCS. In that context, it would appear that the focus should not be on reinstating the Speedway Stadium, but rather recommencing use of the stadium for sport and recreation. There is plainly an issue as to what matters or works are necessary to get racing going again. Further, so far as the physical condition of the stadium or land impacts on viability, it has deteriorated as a result of the appellant's willful neglect, and which caused the Council to have to take legal action to remedy. Plainly, the appellant cannot be allowed any credit in the planning balance on this count. Next, main issue 4, whether there's an identified need for the alternative sports provision proposed. This issue is relevant to NPPF paragraph 99C and Local Plan Policy HS4C third exception. What is proposed is a single, full-size 3G pitch and pavilion clubhouse of a minimum 350 square metre footprint with parking. It's accepted that there may be a need for such facilities in the borough or sub-region, as there are in all local authority areas. The real issue is whether this is the right place and scheme to meet that need. Most key stakeholders do not think so. Main issue 5, whether the benefits of the alternative sport provision outweigh the loss of the former Speedway Stadium use. This issue goes to NPPF paragraph 99C and to Local Plan Policy HS4C third exception. But there's a preliminary point here. Is redevelopment by housing and a 3G pitch facility development for alternative and recreational provision? Otherwise, it requires a planning judgment, taking into account matters such as the number of people involved, the scarcity, the quality and resilience, that's to say longevity, of each use, and what's likely to happen if the appeal is dismissed. Main issue 6. Other benefits of the proposal include the delivery of new market and affordable housing. Both are benefits, although the Council can demonstrate a 5.6-year housing land supply. There is a greater need for affordable housing. There are also economic and environmental benefits to weigh in the overall planning balance. Main issue 7, whether the proposed development makes an appropriate contribution to education, is no longer a main issue in dispute. In the overall planning balance, the Council accepts the site is previously developed land and complies with local policy GP3. However, the breaches of local plan policy HS4C and neighbourhood plan policy LF1 mean that the proposed development ought to be regarded as being contrary to the development plan as a whole for the purposes of section 38(6) of the 2004 Act. In the Council's opinion, the benefits of the development scheme do not, collectively, amount to material considerations that indicate a different outcome. So the appeal ought to be dismissed. SCS and its supporters ought to be given the opportunity to bring back racing to the stadium site.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Richards. I'd now like to turn to the Rule 6 party, the Save Coventry Stadium Group, and invite Mr. Humphreys to give your opening statement, please. Thank you. Right, okay, so when you're ready, Mr. Humphreys, you carry on, thank you.
Thank you, Madam. The Save Coventry Speedway and Stocks campaign, or SCS as I shall hereafter refer to them, wish to see Speedway and stock car racing return to the appeal site. I pause just to say that I note that I don't think there was a single reference to stock car racing in Learned Friends' opening. The appeal site is variously known as the Brandon or Coventry Stadium. The appeal site has had a long and very distinguished association, both locally, nationally and internationally, with Speedway since 1928 and stock car racing since 1954. The stadium is well known for having one of the best shale speedway tracks in the United Kingdom and as the Wembley Stadium of stock car racing. Irrespective of the stadium buildings, the appeal site as a place should, SCS believe, be considered a heritage asset, non-designated, by virtue of that treasured association with speedway and stock car racing. The proposed development would result in a total loss of that heritage asset. Neither SCS, the Council, White Young Green Consultants, nor any of the respective sports governing bodies and related organisations regard the site as surplus to requirements. Is all this significance to be consigned to history in return for an artificial turf football pitch for which there is no great need, certainly not in this location? Its proposed provision is, of course, both an afterthought and speculative. The reference made to speedway and stock car racing simply being a minority interest tends to the discriminatory. The obvious pleasure given to the skillful and courageous participants and to their spectators contributes to well-being and social interaction. This is not to be ignored or diminished. The stadium is recognised, moreover, as a valued community facility by policy LF1 of the Brandon and Bretford Neighbourhood Plan. The local plan inspector was also careful to ensure that the stadium be safeguarded by policy HS4 of the local plan. There is common ground that the 124 proposed homes are not needed for Rugby Council to maintain a 5-year housing supply. Moreover, the local plan makes provision for 14,567 dwellings. The objectively assessed need for Rugby is 9,600 dwellings, added to which Rugby Borough's Rugby Borough is to meet 2,800 of Coventry City's unmet housing need. Quite apart from Coventry's need, the plan already makes provision for 2,167 additional dwellings, that is to say 22.5% more than Rugby's objectively assessed need. So there appears to be no need for the housing proposed on the appeal site. The appellant necessarily tries to put as much weight as possible on the proposed provision of 25 affordable homes. This is, of course, however, a local plan requirement for this type of development. This alone does not, in SCS's view, begin to justify the grant of planning permission. Further, a number of matters relating to the affordable housing proposed require clarification. In addition to which, SCS believe that the proposed development would lead to a greater impact on the openness of the Green Belt. If so, it is not to be regarded as appropriate development, but instead as requiring very special circumstances to be demonstrated, that is to say that all the harms are clearly outweighed by other considerations. Quite apart from the extension of the built coverage of the appeal site in a westwards direction over the existing extensive open areas hitherto used when needed for racing-related parking, the proposed new access would have to break through the existing and characteristic tree cover along the Rugby Road boundary, only thereafter to afford views of the development. I touch upon the relevant background and context. Contrary with respect to Mr. Hooper's view, it is submitted the background is not irrelevant in this case. The appeal site was openly marketed by GVA in 2013, primarily as a residential development opportunity, not simply for continued use, impliedly viably, for speedway and stock car racing. Clearly, the hope value, compensation terms or acquisition terms for residential development, far exceeded that for continued use of the site for speedway and stock car racing. The then owner and RBS, the banker's chargee, wished no doubt to achieve the highest value possible so as to enable loans secured on the site in respect of the then owner's other, it appears unrelated business interests to be repaid. The appellant already had a sufficient interest in or over the land by October 2014 to decide to hold a public exhibition regarding its then proposal for some 250 dwellings to be developed in 2 phases from west to east across the site. The appellant plainly, therefore, from the outset, had no intention of continuing the stadium's use for racing, other than in the short term whilst it progressed its plans for residential development. Indeed, an indication of the appellant's mindset is provided firstly by the view expressed in March 2017 that it was almost certain that an appeal would be successful. Secondly, and similarly, the statement in May of that year, May of 2017, that under no circumstances will Brandon Estates permit stock car racing to return to Brandon Stadium. Thirdly, by the apparent fact that a building's insurance policy was not taken up by the appellant. The acquisition of the site was completed in 2015. The evidence suggests that the stadium was, and I quote, evidently fit for purpose operationally at the point of its closure. Whilst in the autumn of 2016 it appears that Mr. Sandhu, the immediately previous owner, but by now lessee, removed certain racing-related fixtures or fittings, presumably in the belief that he was entitled to do so, and or because he had not been offered the opportunity to continue stock car racing at the site for a further year. In any event, a few months later, he publicly offered to restore them at his own expense. This offer does not appear to have been taken up. No further racing thereafter took place, the appellant company having taken possession of the site in late 2016. The speedway team, known as Coventry Bees, tried to race elsewhere with some financial assistance from the appellant, but this was unsuccessful. Attempts to relocate stock car racing were likewise unsuccessful. Having taken possession of the site in late 2016, the appellants thereafter failed to secure the site properly, despite repeated warnings and complaints, and despite incursions which caused substantial damage, in particular to the grandstand. A formal community protection notice had not only to be issued by the Council in September 2017, but also, and extraordinarily, ultimately, criminal proceedings had to be brought by the Council against the appellant. These resulted in convictions and fines. I think that should be November 2022, sorry, not September. In November 2022, I think that's right, for failures to comply with the notice in respect of the periods the subject of the informations, namely April to September 2019 and May to September 2021. Now, given the very protracted period of time over which these failures occurred, the appellant's intentions for the site and the mindset referred to above, it is reasonable to infer that the neglect was deliberate. Since the convictions, it appears that the site has now been properly secured, and you'll be able to see that on your site visit, madam. Neglect involving the commission of a criminal offence should not be rewarded by the granting of a planning permission. And in the footnotes, I refer to some case law and also the planning policy guide, the planning framework, paragraph 196, in relation to heritage assets, a similar principle. SCS submit, therefore, that when applying the test in the framework, paragraph 99C, as to whether the benefits of the alternative sports and recreation provision clearly outweigh the loss of the current or former use, that current or former use is to be regarded as viable. In any event, SCS believe that there is a real, as opposed to purely hypothetical, prospect that reuse in due course of the appeal site for speedway and stock car racing could be achieved financially if the appeal be dismissed, and that in the longer term there is also a real prospect of the grandstand being rebuilt. The West Midlands Mayor has also put before the inquiry a supportive letter in this regard. Whilst the original planning application was submitted in January 2018, a speedway and stock car needs assessment was only submitted retrospectively at the Council's request in October of that year. SCS took the view, and a subsequent independent report commissioned by the Council from White Young Green supported this view, that the assessment had been poorly researched. Moreover, neither Sport England, in respect of speedway racing, nor the respective governing bodies for speedway and stock car racing had been consulted. White Young Green advised that they were not satisfied that the requirements of paragraph 99A of the framework had been met. The appellant was indulged by the Council for a further 2 years before, after a final warning in May of 2021, the appellant submitted the revised application, which is now before this inquiry. Provision of an artificial turf football pitch is now proposed as alternative sport provision, purportedly to try to satisfy paragraph 99C. The number of dwellings has had to be reduced. Sport England were unimpressed by the supporting justification advanced, and also observed, for example, that it would be harder to achieve the relocation of the current use to an alternative location than to provide a 3G pitch elsewhere. The planning officer herself commented in her report to committee in November of last year that there is no clear and convincing evidence that the alternative sports provision is required. It is noted, moreover, that the 3G feasibility study submitted this year encourages the early provision of the pitch so that it impacts on the feasibility of the other possible proposals for pitches, rather than it being the other way round. And one just observes that the appellant's pursuit of its own self-interest is again apparent. The foregoing matters, all of them, will be explored further as necessary during the inquiry. Thank you very much, Madam.
All right, thank you very much, Mr Humphreys. I think now is probably an opportune point to just have a short break before we then hear from interested parties for the rest of this morning's session. So can I just ask any interested parties who are upstairs in the gallery if you want to just come downstairs, ready for that, and then you're able to access the microphones to give your statement to us later on. Can I just ask that possibly, maybe the council could shut the windows during the break? It is a little bit drafty and noisy, and the window's got up a little bit, so if you don't mind doing that for us, that would be helpful. So if we take a short break now, say for 20 minutes, so we'll come back at 11:40. Thank you. All right, thank you very much, everybody. The time is now 11:40, so we are resumed. So, as I said before the break, we will now continue with our interested parties who wish to speak. I'm not really concerned about what order we speak in, but I think if we start off with Councillor Gillies, if you'd like to start, if you want to come to the microphone there, and then we'll be able to hear you. Or there, even, you can stay there, that's fine. Yeah, thank you very much. Whenever you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I am Councillor Tony Gillies, Chair of the Planning Committee here at Rugby Borough, and one of 3 ward councillors for the Revel and Binley Woods ward, 12 villages in total. Born and bred in the village of Paleton, just 15 minutes from both the Town Hall and Brandon Stadium. I have also experienced being a speedway rider at Brandon and Scunthorpe from 1974 to 1977. A contract with the Bees was countersigned by the legendary promoter Charles Ochiltree, regarded as the best promoter in the business at that time, and who managed the stadium and all events with military precision. After October 1977, I had very little contact with the sport for some decades. The reason for that could be explained if necessary. However, becoming a councillor in 2004 and was elected Mayor of Rugby in May 2013 until June 2014, in January 2014, I was contacted by Gary Thompson, MBE, BEM, the General Secretary of the ACU, the Autocycle Union, headquarters based here in Rugby. The ACU licensed most motorcycle sports in the UK, both riders and race circuits. I was asked to consider becoming the independent chairman of the SCB, the Speedway Control Bureau. The independent chairman would have no voting rights, chairs the meetings only, and must be totally independent from the sport, which I was. All the meetings would be held locally in the Rugby offices in Wood Street. I accepted the position in February 2014 until stepping down in May 2018. The SCB has delegated powers from the ACU to regulate the sport of speedway in the UK. It is made up of 2 members of the ACU, one of which was Gary Thompson, and 2 members of British Speedway Promoters Limited. Following the initial closure of Brandon Stadium in 2016, and during an SCB meeting with the stadium under discussion, it was intimated that it may be possible, should the stadium reopen, to move the ACU headquarters to Brandon Stadium, which would provide advantages for both organisations. From 2014 to 2018, I visited every speedway venue and some stock car circuits in the UK to see how the sport had changed from my involvement in the late 1970s. I spoke to every speedway promoter at each circuit, many riders, drivers, mechanics, engine tuners, many officials, volunteer helpers, track curators, and many fans on the terracing and in the bars and hospitality suites. A real cross-section of people from Edinburgh in the north to Plymouth in the south. The social well-being that I witnessed was outstanding. From the top stars on the track, right through to the families and the young fans on the terraces, which simply could not be measured in any report or policy statement. All this gave me a unique insight into how the sport had progressed and where Brandon Stadium stood within the 2 sports of stock car racing and speedway racing in the UK. In the 1970s, the 3 best stadia for the big speedway meetings were Wembley for the World Final, Brandon for the British Final, and the Hyde Road Bellevue circuit for the British League Riders Final. When we include Formula 1 stock car, then there were only 2, Bellevue and Brandon, for the big meetings. However, my travels and observations concluded in 2018 that Brandon Stadium would still be the top stadium for the promotion of the 2 sports, with the closest other stadium being at Kings Lynn, as none of the 8 local authority areas that Rugby Borough has surrounding it has any such facility that promoted both sports. As a councillor, I attend many local parish council meetings, all of which have supported the need to reinstate the stadium and its associated sports. The Brandon Estates proposal for alternative sport and recreational provision clearly would not outweigh its former use and the value-added well-being enjoyed by the local and wider motorsport community. These views are reinforced in my day job as an electrician working in and around Rugby, and still working from 1974, and being asked by regular customers since 2017, what is happening in Brandon? We want it back. And a few examples of those companies are Neil Terry Printing on Railway Terrace, Rugby Electrical in Church Street, the Malt Kiln Farm Shop, Streatham-under-Foss, Brinklow Post Office, the Golden Lion, Easenhall, Sophisticate, Newbold and Avon, Merton Hall Farm, Brandon, Dunchurch Services, Arnold Street, and Top Farm, Paleton. These and others add to many individuals, residents from all around the borough, that stop me in the street, or whilst working in their homes, and ask the same question: when are we getting the stadium back? In conclusion, Brandon Stadium is by far the most successful sporting venue in the history of the Borough of Rugby. That is, in terms of attracting the largest crowds for a single event, the most world champions seen in competition, and the only venue attracting live TV coverage. My own conclusion is that the stadium should remain and host the existing sports, must be run by the very best management, as it was during the Charles Ochiltree dynasty, and in a style that listens and acts upon neighbour concerns, but also accommodates additional sporting facilities, such as a gym or fitness centre, for locals of all ages to participate. I feel confident, and it is obvious, that Brandon Stadium has enormous sporting potential for the whole borough-wide community and beyond. All that is required is the opportunity for it to happen, as there are thousands that want to see Brandon return again, so as to continue to build upon its history and sporting heritage that has been witnessed by so many spectators and participants over the last 90 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Mr Goatley, do you want to ask the Councillor any questions, comments?
No, ma'am. If I can just make the observation now for most of these matters, because I'm going to be asking questions of other witnesses, I'm not intending to effectively replicate the same question seriatim. So, no, thank you very much, Councillor.
Right, thank you, Mr Goatley. I'll give you the opportunity, but I can understand your position. That's helpful, thank you. Okay, then. We've got Mr Morris, then, please. If you'd like to, can stay there with the microphone, that's fine. Just introduce yourself first and then continue with your statement. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Philip Morris. I'm the current Chief Executive Officer of British Speedway. I'm also the FIM, which is the World Governing Body Race Director for the World Grand Prix Series, which I've done for 8 years. I was appointed by the governing body this year. I'm proud to say I was headhunted for the job, and I've been taken on to improve the product, make it more diverse, make it more attractable to younger audiences. I was born in Wales. I was a schoolboy grass track champion myself, which I became British champion 5 times. I became a professional speedway rider at the age of 16, and I joined Reading Racers Speedway team just before my 16th birthday, and I've raced professionally for 20 years till my retirement in 2008. I was then appointed head coach of the British youth system, under 21 and under 16 and youth development for foreseeable years after that. I also played a key role in developing Elite League rider draft, which attracted younger, more talented riders to move up into the top echelon. Then in December 2014, I was very honoured and privileged to be asked, and I accepted the job of being race director of the highest level of the sport. Obviously, the sport is in my blood, and obviously a lot of the things that's been said doesn't sit well with me, but I'm biting my tongue and I'm going to be as professional as I can. The governing body is obviously interested in this appeal as a third party. We 100% want Speedway back at Coventry. We would welcome them back with open arms. Their history, their heritage, as which has already been said, is you can't argue against it. So UK Speedway, it's now 100 years old, and it's a very popular professional sport. It's introduced in the United Kingdom in 1928. The senior professional sport is competed by riders on 500cc motorcycles. It's the cleanest fuel you can use. It's a bio-methanol fuel, which, if any of you know, they're trying to get cars to run on these to hit their targets for biodiversity and carbon neutral. So this is a very good point that we can bring to the sport. The oval circuits, as if you don't know, riders power slide around, and it's an event for fans to come and watch. It's on a league basis, very much similar to football or rugby. Unlike Formula One, World Rally Championships, MotoGP, you can see everything in front of your eyes from start to finish. So it's got a very good selling point. That's why it's a family sport. You can definitely bring your family to any event and you'll see that there's no fan segregation. There's no issues. I'm going slightly off topic here, but I work at Cardiff for the Speedway Grand Prix at the Millennium Stadium, now Principality Stadium, and I'm aware for a football match here they have around 500 police plus. For a rugby match they have around 300 police plus. For a Speedway event they have less than 100. So just to put you in the picture of the sort of scale, we don't sort of have any very little issues with fan hooliganism or anything like that. Following its introduction, Speedway, greyhound racing was also introduced from the United States, and that was linked very much with Speedway as it is today at some events. At no time have we ever allowed trackside betting, which they do at horse racing or greyhound racing. It's not something we have. A league system has been operational since 1929, and 24 teams now compete in 3 leagues, 2 professional leagues and 1 semi-professional league. Since its introduction into the UK, Speedway has attracted riders from around the world. And again, a lot of comments I've seen from the other party have said we can't attract high-level riders. We now have 6 of the top 10 riders in the world racing in our league. Plus we have the world champions from 2012, 13, 15, 17, 18 and 2021 competing in the top league in this country. And that will link on to my further when I talk about the highest level. Speedway racing also includes individual events, most significant being World Championships, which was run very early on at Wembley and around the world, in rotation in overseas venues. But since 1996, there's been a World Championship has been on a Grand Prix series. It's around the world in the United Kingdom, Australia, Austria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Italy, Latvia, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Russia, Slovenia and Sweden. And I am the current race director of this series. Since 2000, the British Grand Prix has been held, as I've said, at the Principality Stadium, formerly the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, where a temporary speedway track is constructed. The Cardiff event is widely thought to be one of the pinnacles of the Grand Prix season. This is not my opinion, this is the opinion of riders and fans. The last British Grand Prix not held at Cardiff was held at the Coventry Stadium in 98, 99 and 2000. So please respect that this was the highest World Championship event staged at Brandon. At the highest level of Speedway, I can confidently say that riders earn excess of €1 million per year. A British rider has won the World Championship 3 times in the last 10 years, which is a very good statistic for us as a nation. FIM also hold international team events, and since its opening in 2016, the National Speedway Stadium in Manchester has become one of the favourite venues for FIM international events, having the World Cup in 2016 and the 2021 Speedway of Nations. These are the very highest level team World Championship events. Team Great Britain have won Speedway of Nations in 2021. They've come runners-up in the same event in 22 and runners-up in the Speedway World Cup in 23. I think over the last 4 to 5 years, they've been statistically the most successful team in the world. Despite the loss of full season of UK Speedway events during COVID, as far as I'm aware, no British government funding went to any Speedway track in the UK. So to get through COVID like they did, and saying the sport is decaying and dying, I think that's very disrespectful to show how we managed to get through that difficult period. In 2022, after a 15-year interval, Speedway was restored at Oxford Stadium following local council's resistance to the landowners' development attempts. And I think this is a very important point. Speedway's return has been a massive success, with capacity crowds in attendance on many, many occasions. Given Coventry Stadium's heritage, there is no reason why this will not be repeated if Speedway is restored to the site. I'd like to touch on broadcasting now, which I'm across, obviously, the world plus the British situation. In 2021, there was a competitive bidding process for the world rights for the Speedway Grand Prix, for a decaying sport that's not of any interest. Warner Brothers Discovery, which are one of the top 500 companies in the world, and one of the top 10, well, they are in the top 10 media companies. They're a media conglomerate. They paid 100 million euros over 10 years for the rights to own Speedway. Bearing in mind, Speedway is the same product in a Grand Prix as we have in the British League, with very similar riders. The packaging is different, and my job is to improve the package in the UK. I would like to say Warner Brothers Discovery is the Olympics is their big Winter Olympics, Grand Prix tennis, Grand Slam tennis, and the Grand Tour of cycling. Speedway has been bought and put in their gold category, so they believe the sport is very, very worth investing in and viable. Premiership Speedway is also broadcast by Warner Brothers Discovery under their umbrella. So this is part of their pan-global. Maybe not known to many people, but we are live linear, this is the important thing I'm going to bring up. Linear TV to everyone is when you switch on your TV and watch BBC One, BBC Two. I have 2 daughters. They don't watch linear TV. They watch YouTube or Netflix, and I'm sure anyone that's got younger generations realise that linear TV is not as it used to be. So linear TV figures are not just what they used to be. You also need to look at the online streaming services of everything. So with the British, we do go linear every Monday night, or almost every Monday night during the season. This has been successful enough to be taken in Poland linear, to be shown live in Poland. It's been taken in Denmark to be shown live. It's almost been taken in Sweden as well. So there's 4 countries that carry our Speedway League live in 4 countries. This has helped me vastly in speaking to sponsors for the league. We currently have Aon, which is a very big company, and I'm speaking now to one of the biggest blue chip companies. I would say is probably a top 100 company in the world, hopefully for sponsorship for next year. So everything I'm trying to explain to you, if it's such a dying, decaying sport, these companies wouldn't be speaking to me. Eurosport and Discovery, they broadcast all the UK leagues. We have 18 live meetings, and again, a bid was made for this, and we're halfway through a 5-year contract, and contrary to what the other party says, for confidentiality, I cannot divulge a figure, but they invest over 7 figures per year into British Premiership Speedway. And I can back that up off the record, but if anyone needs to ask me a question, I can't give it confidential information. all I can give is a 7-figure investment from Warner Brothers Discovery per year into British Speedway. We also have a new streaming network called British Speedway Networks, which is an OTT, and this is where linear is OTT is your streaming, your Netflix. So with the OTT, the live subscription, we have 54 live broadcasts on a commercially viable basis that does very well. Many Speedway clubs also have their own media and streaming service, which are viable and commercially benefit, which has not been mentioned. This is something else that could be done that does bring in a good, and maybe Matt Ford can speak about this because his club at Poole do this, and you can maybe ask him on that. The result is between Eurosport, Discovery Plus and British Speedway Network, 72 Speedway meetings will be broadcast live in 2023. It is usual for there to be live meetings, 2 to 3, maybe even 4 live broadcasts per week. And I'm right in saying that there is a healthy level of broadcast coverage enabling Speedway to be enjoyed by many millions of viewers throughout the world. Throughout UK, sorry. Many million viewers in the UK, many more million viewers outside the UK, because we also use Discovery Plus, which is Warner Brothers, Netflix, and that's available worldwide. So British Speedway is available worldwide to watch if Discovery of it is there. So I now go on to Team Great Britain. Sorry. Can you hear me okay if I don't speak into that? I'm quite loud anyway. So British Speedway Promoters Limited, who I'm the CEO of, has introduced a number of policies to develop the national team. As a result, we've already spoke about it. The Great British Speedway team have been very, very successful. We also have a youth policy. So the British Speedway Promoters Limited, they run throughout British Speedway, and each elite team is required to have a junior Great British rider. So we develop a youth element, again, as I've said. This is designed to ensure young British talent get invested into the teams and developed. The youth development programme we have has been a great success for many years, and a whole host of current professional riders riding in Britain and throughout Europe have come through the British youth system. Since 2018, the Great British Under-21 team have achieved success to a world stage, and we've said about declaiming their world championships. Since 2018, they've increased activities on and off track. This is part of their KPIs, that they will have to do certain amount of academies, certain amount of things like that. So the GB Academy for Riders 12 plus, it helps. We have the top 18 male and female riders across the country who race on various different bikes. They take part in series on track, coaching, training and development sessions. In addition to the GB Academy, we have a tracking success program for the elite athletes of 16 plus. The program, which is led by Head of Performance Chris Neville and Performance Psychologist Jeremy Holt. Now these guys are involved in Premiership football teams, so it's a very high level skill set. The data-driven development pathway with 4 pillars of it: physical, technical, mechanical and mindset, and in-depth mechanical. Physical and medical data is collected on both on and off track events to enable to build a picture of elite level performance looks like in a speedway athlete. And as we get, the policies have borne fruit. For the final day of the competition, the winning GB team of the Speedway of Nations of 21 were made up of 3 riders: Robert Lambert, Daniel Bewley and Tom Brennan, who had all won the British Under-21 Championship. And I'm also proud to say Robert Lambert and Tom Brennan won the Under-16 British Championship. So it shows that the pathway is there for British riders. And I think I'm confident in saying Dan Bewley and Robert Lambert are now currently 5th and 6th in the World Grand Prix standard. In 2023, British Speedway has another good year for youth development, with 6 clubs holding a British Youth Championship involving over 45 riders, which included 3 female riders, and all being under the age of 16, and depending on their age category, 3 different classes. For the first time in 2023, British Speedway I'm proud to say also ran a women's championship alongside the youth championship, which included a German, a lady that was in a Speedway Grand Prix 2, which is the second level, second tier for under 21 riders, Selina Lieberman, as well as a number of British women. The championship was run over 3 rounds at 3 different venues during June, and I think they should be applauded. We're looking to do a lot more of that next year, and we're looking forward to the next batch of British youth riders that will be making their name on the world stage within the next couple of seasons, and we have 16-year-old Ashley Boughton at Oxford, and then some under 16 guys, William Carnes and Cooper Rushton, naming a few who could be big stars in the future. Gender equality and women in Speedway, this is very important. I'm sure you all see what happens in football. The Lionesses, or are they allowed to be called Lionesses now, the impact they've had on the UK as a whole. You know, maybe getting 500 people there to now having full stadiums. We understand this is a big part. And again, yes, Speedway is, I'm not going to say it's not male dominated, because it is. But most sports are, unless it's a specific women's sport. But we want to be more inclusive, and in line with an FIM initiative, which also I'm involved in, to increase the participation of women in all areas of Speedway, from officials down to riders. The BSPL has also held events for women in Speedway, as we said then, the British Open, and this is to support any FIM objectives to establish international and world championship ranking events. There was also a Women's Speedway Academy held at the National Speedway Stadium in Manchester. I attended as my role as race director, and offering a 360-degree approach to Speedway, which included classroom sections as well as on-track racing. A number of these athletes that competed from other motorcycle sports such as motocross, enduro, road racing and trials. They were so successful and so happy that a handful of them have actually gone out and bought bikes and transitioned across to Speedway. So I was really pleased that from other motorsport disciplines, they've managed to get the bug as well. This is an important one for me. The Academy was also attracted some big corporate companies because it was very diverse, and the lady that the sponsorship manager at Karcher, she was blown away by the sport, and she's actually been again with her family to watch. And I apologise for the hooligan element. It's not correct at all football, but there is still that when you walk out of a football stadium, you're sometimes 50 police either side, you police horses. It's quite intimidating for a family if you're taking your children. Where Speedway, I don't think had that. And she purposely said that she was very, very pleased with the ethos of Speedway and the diversity, that the family welcoming environment such as Speedway, and the marketing director, she feels she's safe as a woman attending a Speedway event rather than a football event. I go on to the environment. Obviously, the British Speedway Promoters Limited is working to reduce the sport's environmental impact, as you know, it's part of our ethos. The FIM is the governing body of the sport. We're all under that umbrella, and they regularly meet in Brussels with EU lawmakers on how to reduce emissions, how to keep noise down. And if you go back 20, 30 years, the noise has been reduced probably every 4 or 5 years in conjunction with, you know, the way the world is. So I'm sure that will carry on. So the noise will be less as the future goes forward. We're committed to it, and we adopt an FIM code back to 1994. This document and the latest version was adopted, and it's updated every year by a commission. The code regulates and recommends improvements and relationships between motorcycling and the environment, and promotes sustainable events. The regulations are recommended refer to, in particular, noise, fuel, protection of the ground and cleaning issues, behaviour and activists of spectators, organisers, circuit and track managers, race participants, and even road users. Duties for the commission, delegates, and environmental stewards. And the BSPL completely follows the FIM International Sustainable Commission guidelines going forward. Several ideas are being looked into in many sports arenas, which you know. There's a real good initiative in Germany where they have a heck of a lot of solar panels which completely run the stadium, and that's something that we're looking at in the future for British Speedway. Also, we have a current e-bike that, although we don't want it to replace the standard combustion engines, we do see it as a very good training tool for riders to be able to use it without any noise. So that's a good training tool for young children, whether it's boys or girls, to be involved in jumping on a bike and racing at any time. Land tenure is my next point. In many cases with Speedway, they've operated on tracks with greyhound and stadia which has been constructed around the greyhounds. In some cases, or in many cases, Speedway clubs are licensees and they don't actually own the land, which is very difficult. And I really think that this case could be a synonymous point in Speedway history. I really mean it, because I see that they quote all these clubs have gone into administration. We've got a promoter here that will speak next. He's been at Wolverhampton for over 30 years, and I know he's been a profitable business in every one of them years. The reason it's closed is not through administration, as the appellant use a lot of. So, yes, there are some that's had administration, but also the highest level of football. If you go to the second tier down, administration is happening monthly. You look at Guinness Premiership Rugby, 3 teams went into administration last year. We're not saying let's throw rugby into the bin because it's a dying sport. It's not the case. There's just these things happen in business. Sorry, next page. Birmingham Speedway is also at risk for a very similar reason. Development, and Peterborough Speedway, development. It's not through business acumen. It's not through lack of profits. It's through development on the sites. And the majority of cases, and I can confidently stand by that, are through development. Rebuttal, I'll come to my important parts. Speedway is a dying sport, as suggested by the appellant in paragraph 6.1. It's not a dying sport. It's not a dying sport. That is 100% my opinion, and of course it's my opinion, and of course I will say that. But I can back it up with a lot of things I've said there. You don't have a company like Warner Brothers Discovery investing in World Speedway at 100 million, investing in UK TV rights. If it's a dying sport, they wouldn't have none of that. I have read and take issue with the proofs of Gareth Hooper, Clark Osborne, and John Eadie. I rebuke their evidence as follows. So, point 52. Mr. Hooper adopts a number of points to support the appellant's arguments about Speedway. I reject his propositions, and what he says are irrelevant facts on which they are based. In particular, paragraph 5.2 from Mr. Hooper's, my own personal knowledge of having been involved in planning applications relating to the redevelopment of 2 Speedway tracks elsewhere in the UK, it is clear the viability of Speedway as a sport as a whole is severely challenged. I can go with that. All businesses are challenged. We have a Costa crisis around the world. We've had COVID. Businesses are tough at the time. I'm not going to stand here and say everything's rosy. But he says the impact of which sports are the need for a stadium to be retained does not exist and is surplus to requirements. That is a very, very big oversight. It's not surplus to requirements, and I'm hoping that people can explain that to you. I find it impossible to reconcile this opinion with his mission, and this is my important one. If anyone could look at my appendices PM1. So if you open that up, Gareth Hooper and Clark Osborne are trying their best to build a stadium in Swindon to run the sport. There's a very, very nice website they've made and how they want to bring Speedway back. And that to me, that doesn't make sense, how he can say it's a dying sport, it's decaying, it has no surplus, and then suddenly he's on the other side of the fence trying to build a stadium to run Speedway. That one just doesn't, there's no knowledge to it and no logic to it. So I'm happy to take questions on that, but I can't see any logic. I do understand Clark Osborne does say in it that you need to have multi-use, which Coventry Speedway will be, with the stock cars and the Speedway, and also like Manchester's a perfect example. It has a 3G pitch on the infield, and that's used by the schools daily. So there's also options to work together. So the Swindon Motorsports, for me, is really interesting for everyone to look into that, have a look at the website, and Gareth Hooper is their advisor on their planning, Clark Osborne, and George Edwards, Steve Park, and Terry Russell. So it's very interesting to see Clark Osborne's outtake on that, and also Gareth Hooper's. So I then go on to Clark Osborne's. I rebuke the suggestion in the following paragraph of Clark Osborne's proof. In paragraph 8.9, Mr. Osborne suggests that my view is that Speedway racing has a declining market and rising costs. Well, I applaud him on saying rising costs, because everyone in this room knows that the world is rising costs. Our shopping at Tesco's, Asda's, Sainsbury's, Aldi's, wherever you are, is going up. Our fuel in our houses are going up. So that statement is a little bit, pretty obvious to me. But the declining market, I disagree with. Squeezing the opportunity for profit and continued and contribution to investment cost. The outlook is for further decline and closure of existing facilities due to the accumulation of operating losses. I would like to just drop in here a personal case. I was captain of a team in Reading Racers. I was pictured holding up a brand new stadium with Clark Osborne, showing the new stadium, how good it would look, how fantastic everything was. 2 years later, the site we was on was closed. No new stadium was built. And the stadium today, 15 years later, is still derelict. No building is on there. So, again, I'm just going for my personal opinion. I was very disappointed with that, what happened there. You know, the promise of a new stadium and the selling of the dream to everybody, which I was involved in, and then not going through with it. Okay, next page. The opinion, this is carrying on, is the opinion is odds with the mission of Swindon Motorsports, which I've spoke about, a company which Mr. Osborne is a director, and his Gaming International holds the largest shareholding. So on one hand, he's opposing everything we're doing here, and on the other hand, he's jumped to our side of the fence and he wants to work with the British Speedway Promoters Association to build a new stadium. So that's my big one on that one. I go on to John Eadie next. I rebut his suggestions in the following paragraph of John Eadie's proof. In paragraph 2.10, it suggests that since 2016, 8 teams, excluding Coventry Bees, have gone into administration. And to best of our knowledge, not reappeared in another guise. These include Lakeside Hammers, Ryehouse Rockets, Coventry Bees, Workington Comets, Stoke Potters, Eastbourne Eagles, Newcastle Diamonds, and more recently Swindon Robins. I can tell you that Swindon Robins, their licence is on ice. They're still a promotion. They've not been expelled. They've not been left out. Their promotion is still on ice, and they can come back whenever they need it. In all the teams referred to that have stopped races, Coventry haven't been unable to race, obviously because of the appeal site. Lakeside have been unable to race following an acquisition of Arena Essex for property development. Ryehouse following a takeover of management, unfamiliar with Speedway, and the closure of the track by new landlords as part of development plans. Development has also stopped Stoke Speedway, and redevelopment plans, obviously at Swindon, as we've already spoke about. As far as I'm aware, I'm honest enough to say Eastbourne, Newcastle and Workington have gone into administration, but not the 8 as they said. Land tenure issues resulted in the closure of 4 tracks referred to by Mr. Eadie. And Mr. Eadie's suggestion makes no mention and fails to take into account the reinstatement of Speedway Oxford. Also, the reinstatement of Speedway very successfully also at Workington, following the construction of a new track. And Mr. Eadie gives no comparable figures for the administration of other sports such as football or rugby, which I've quickly explained to you. Every sport has its issues, and so do we at the moment. Everybody we know in the world has issues, but I think it's a thriving sport with what I've explained outside of that. In paragraph 2.1.0, it also suggests that it is understood that Monmore Stadium, up until this year, the home of Wolverhampton Wolves, will cease to accommodate Speedway as of 24, choosing to focus solely on greyhound racing. On the 28th of August, it was announced that Wolverhampton Speedway will not compete in the 2024, following Orlando's decision not to allow Speedway at Monmore Green, which brings Speedway to an end after 95 years. Again, Speedway absence will not be because of lack of popularity, viability, or commercial. It's not, none of them. There's zero issues with any of that. So I need to explain that when it's a dying, decaying sport, how can it still be viable? And I'll allow Chris Van Straten to talk about that because he is the promoter. It's because of we don't own the land, we don't own the stadiums, which is obviously the places we do own the stadiums, we have more of a say on things. The local council is assisting Wolverhampton in hopefully trying to find a new venue. Paragraph 2.11, Mr. Eadie makes a number of suggestions about broadcast viewing figures. For the reasons outlined above, I refute these suggestions, and I've already gone across why, how, and I can get deeper into it, but there's also confidentiality about Warner Brothers Discovery contracts and viewing figures. But if it needs to be done behind closed doors, I can give you that. In paragraph 2.12 and 2.14, a number of suggestions are made about the National Speedway Stadium in Manchester, said to be based on statements by a Manchester City employee. These paragraphs fail to mention that Bellevue Speedway in Manchester has competed successfully in a purpose-built stadium from 1929 to 1987, and to the end of the 2015 season, the Bellevue Greyhound Stadium in Manchester up to the end of 2015, before moving to the new National Speedway Stadium. That the National Speedway Stadium could be used for several months to start the 2016 season, and as a result, a number of the construction defects also resulted in the abandonment of the first meeting, and its impact on the accounts of the business. The popularity of National Speedway for international events, so it fails. I refer to, now this is my important one here, if you can look at my appendices, we've had an email back from the lady that gave the information from the Manchester Council. She was very, very disappointed with what Mr. John Eadie wrote. She was very, the words she used, as I'll read out to you. I apologise. I did speak with John Eadie, but as discussed, my words have been spun to give a negative view. Please see highlighted that isn't from me and changes in bold to reflect my conversation. I also asked him to add the following, which I reply he decided not to show. She actually asked him to provide this next line. Bellevue Speedway won the first British League Championship, Premiership Championship since 1993, a moment the fans have waited 29 years for. The goal is to retain the title in 23 and to lead role the restructure of the sport, giving it its profile it deserves, and also broaden its appeal to diverse grouping and communities in the local area with our neighbourhood networking team. So when somebody from the Manchester planning and sort of council gives this information to John Eadie, I would have respected him to put that in his report. And I'm sure both sides would agree with that. When you ask someone to give you some information and they give you a statement to put, if they don't put that statement out, surely, if someone asks you to do something, why wouldn't you do it? So I just want to make sure you're all aware of that. And then going through, she was not happy with it, and I don't need to go through it because it's a lot, but you can see how she defended what was wrote and wasn't particularly happy with it. And you can see the email there. A number of suggestions were made and facts about Speedway at Coventry Stadium nationally and internationally. And again, Mr Eady does not refer to reinstatement of capacity crowds attending Oxford, which I feel this case is very similar. Oxford didn't have Speedway for a long time because they tried to get planning on it. The planning didn't get given, so it's now been reinstated, and it's a very successful sporting venue, profitable and doing very well. A couple of small caveats. I was at Bellevue last night, Manchester, for a playoff fixture. Unfortunately, weather beat us. We was live on TV. But I can confidently tell you, and I've asked if I can give this information, it's the highest pre-sale tickets they have ever had. So for a dying, decaying sport, to have the highest ever, and that can be backed up. And then I also spoke to the Ipswich promoter, who on Thursday had a knockout cup final, and he's allowed me to say that they've had over 3,000 fans there. So I have to, use them. I would like to say in my final thing, Speedway doesn't just benefit the fans that come. It doesn't give them a friendship base. It doesn't give them a community sort of feel. It doesn't also give them happiness and well-being. It also benefits local businesses who provide food, who provide drinks to that service, who provide... So these things don't seem to... What I've seen doesn't seem to be covered anywhere. So when you have a speedway track, you have to have local businesses, and Bellevue's a perfect example. There's a local pie man. He's a guy called Bowen Pies, and he's actually a rider. He provides them with, I think, 300-400 pies every week as a business. And he said if he didn't have that, it would really affect his business. And I know it's a small thing, but all these things add up. So it's not just about, can we do Speedway? Yes, we can. It's the benefit to and also the staff that work there. You're employing people. I understand there'll be employment if you're building houses. I get that. But also Speedway has its own thing in that. So from my side, thank you very much for listening to me. I appreciate the time for allowing me to come here and give my side to the story. I am passionate about the sport I love. I've been in it all my life, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rice. That's been really interesting, and thank you very much for that. Mr. Goatley, do you have any questions or follow-up?
Just
Mr.
a
Morris?
very small number.
Certainly,
if I may.
yeah. Carry.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
now good afternoon. Can I just ask, have you ever been involved in the ownership and management of a speedway stadium?
Management, yes, not promotion.
Right. And what speedway stadium did you manage?
I didn't manage the stadium. I was manager of a team.
Okay. Team management is different to running the overall stadium. Would you agree? Yeah. So in terms of the ownership and management of a speedway stadium, you've not been involved in that?
No, but as a CEO, I can see everybody's business. I can see everybody's profit loss. I can see everybody's what I need to see.
That's CEO as your current role?
Yes.
Right. Now, since 2016, 8 teams have stopped racing. Is that
You
correct?
said administration. I'm just...
Well, just deal with questions I've asked you. Well,
Okay,
once
but
you set your...
you're changing what
Can
you
you,
wrote.
Mr.
Okay.
Morris, if you want to just answer your own questions, I'll tell you what, I'll just listen in. But the idea of this is me ask you some questions and you to answer them. 8 teams have stopped racing?
Yeah.
And not reappeared. Is that correct?
No, that's incorrect. Incorrect.
Which ones have reappeared?
Workington and Oxford, which you haven't mentioned.
Don't think that was on the list of those who had disappeared.
Correct.
The 8.
It's a little bit of insight. If you're saying the ones that disappear, you should really make it fair and bring the ones back that come back as well, to make a fair argument.
Okay. Now, you'd said that there are plans to restore Speedway at Eastbourne and Rye House. Have that resulted in anything that is tangible at the moment in either of those teams
not yet.
re-emerging? Thank you.
There is another one I can't mention due to confidentiality, but there's a good chance there will be a new track in Speedway next year, but obviously I can't give that information out, unfortunately.
Now, can you assist us in terms of the broadcast media fees
How are those distributed to individual stadiums?
So the British Speedway Promoters Limited is the promoter of each club, and they get a share of it from the TV rights that are paid by Warner Brothers Discovery.
Right. So that's to each club. What about to each stadium rather than each club? Because the clubs are distinct to the stadium. Isn't that correct?
The tenants at the stadium, yeah, they obviously get which Coventry Speedway would be the tenants. They would get the money to help fund their season and to help fund their progression.
Right, so nothing actually goes to the stadium itself directly, other than by whatever the arrangements are between the team and the stadium.
But that will be the same.
Am I correct in that?
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah. And in respect of the various elements on broadcast viewing, can you assist us what the broadcast viewing figures have been over the last, say, 10 years?
Unfortunately, I can't give you the last 2 years. The ones you've got are, I wouldn't say accurate, because BRB figures are not accurate, and you need to get them direct from the company, which I could get to you privately, but I can't give you...
This is a statutory public inquiry.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't give them figures out.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Morris. Thank you, Mum.
Okay, thank you. Just before you sit down, sorry, Mr. Morris, there's a couple of things from me.
Yes.
You mentioned in your statement that one of the difficulties really is around land tenure and the fact that most clubs don't own the stadiums, or the organisation, the governing body doesn't own the stadiums. How many stadiums are actually owned by the individual clubs in the country?
I'm probably thinking around half a dozen.
Do you know which ones they are?
Kings Lynn, Scunthorpe, I don't want to get this wrong.
No, it's okay.
Workington.
Yeah. That's the reopened Workington, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Let me go through. We've got... Let me come back to you on that.
Don't worry, that's fine. There are,
but yeah,
you think it's about half a dozen or so.
And when you go to different countries around the world, in Sweden, Denmark, Poland, which the product is very successful, the councils own the stadiums and they lease it to and they have no problems with these planning because the stadiums are sort of set as sporting venues and they don't lose them. This is what we have in this country, and I feel it hurts us a lot with losing due to planning tenure issues.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Just a general question, really. What has the impact been since the closure of Coventry? I think the appellant and some of the evidence I've seen suggesting that there may be issues in terms of the number of events and the overall sport throughout the country. Do you need another stadium? Can the existing stadiums cope? What would the impact be if it reopened? What was the impact when it closed?
Well, as you can see, as the Honourable Gentleman said, that we have lost some tracks, so we're trying to get the ones back that are still in situ, and there is a new one that will be coming back completely new to Speedway potentially next year. So yeah, there's obviously issues faced with it, but I can 100% sure, because Coventry with its legacy and with its former glory and everything is synonymous with the actual Coventry Bees as a product, would be more than welcome back. Very similar to the Wolverhampton Wolves or the Bellevue Aces. They're synonymous with the sport in this country. So I would put Coventry Bees up there in the top echelon of legacies of the sport. So in my eyes, it's important that they're back on track and that logo is seen back on track.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morris. Thank you for coming this morning. Okay, now, on my list I have a Mr. Here, sorry, yes, I'm sure I get it wrong, Mr. Here. So would you like to give me your comments, please?
Okay.
Either sit or stand, it's entirely up to you. Just make sure you use the microphone. Thank you.
Okay. Right, my name is David Here. I live in Binley Woods, which is about 3/4 of a mile away from Brandon Stadium. I've been a Coventry Bees supporter since about 1964. And I've taken my children up, my 3 boys, when they were younger. They're now grown up. I don't now have the opportunity to take my grandchildren up because the Speedway isn't there. I'm also a trustee of Woolston Leisure and Community Centre, and I work very closely with the centre manager on the finances, setting of targets and checking how we're going and monitoring the targets. I'm here today on behalf of Woolston Leisure and Community Centre. The centre manager is tied up with a function that's going on today, so she can't be here. I want to read a statement, though, from the centre manager, Lisa Jones, that she has put out on the 14th of September this year regarding Brandon Stadium proposed development. And this is what she's written. As a registered charity, Woolston Leisure and Community Centre's main purpose is to serve the local community and surrounding villages. We are not government funded, and we rely on the income generated from the services we provide. We are aware of the latest application for the development of Brandon Stadium and the intention to offer alternative sports and recreational provision with the installation of a 3G all-weather football pitch. This is of grave concern as we are located only 1.6 miles from Brandon Stadium, and we know of at least 10 other venues offering 3G pitch hire within an 8-mile radius. If this were to be approved, then the competition, i.e. targeting the same users within close proximity, could have a detrimental impact on the centre's income. Our 3G facility is used by several local football clubs, boys, girls and senior teams, the residents of Woolston, Brandon, Bretford, Binley Woods and even some groups from Coventry. The monies received from the hire of the 3G all-weather pitch is the second highest generator of income for our centre. If the application were to be approved in its entirety, then this could potentially threaten the future of a local community building. As such, we strongly oppose the application for the inclusion of a 3G all-weather football pitch at the Brandon Stadium site. That's what she has written. I'd just like to say that we regard the inclusion of this 3G pitch purely as a box-ticking exercise to meet planning regulations. But at the same time, it's causing a major threat to the viability of Woolston Leisure Centre to continue and what it offers to the community. Not just a 3G football pitch, but we have 2 function rooms that we hire out. We've got the 3G football pitch. We've got 5 grass football pitches as well, mainly used by girls, boys, on a Saturday and a Sunday. We've got a fitness gym and we've also got a police office. So if we start losing finances from the 3G pitch, and we know that some of the teams, a number of teams that use our 3G pitch come from Binley Woods, some from Coventry, they'll have to drive by the old stadium where the new 3G football pitch is before they can get to ours 1.6 miles further down the road. And that's a major concern to us. If we start losing income, I know personally that we are struggling at the moment, have struggled since COVID, and because of the cost of living crisis, it's a major struggle and that could tip us over the edge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Here. Now, there's 2 other gentlemen there, sat there, which I assume wish to speak. I'm not exactly sure who you are, so can you just introduce yourselves for me, please, and then we...
Which way?
Either way. We'll go the gentleman on the end there.
I'm Christopher Van Straten. I've been the promoter at Wolverhampton Speedway since 1986.
Right, can I just ask you to spell your name for me, please?
Christopher Van Straten, V-A-N,
yeah,
and then separate word, S-T-R-A-A-T-E-N.
Right. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
And, and as I say, I've been promoter of Wolverhampton Speedway since 1986. And touching on another subject that Mr. Morris mentioned, in who own stadiums and developed stadiums, I also opened successfully a stadium in Middlesbrough, trading as Redcar some 15, 16 years ago now. And when you mentioned freeholds, that's on a long lease from the local authority. So not necessarily freehold, but very stable and very successful. And that is purely motorsports on that circuit, which makes a huge difference. And I'm here today to explain, because Wolverhampton was used as an example of Speedway's decline, and it is not of Wolverhampton Speedway's making. We've operated very successfully during that young period of time, and we were taken aback and quite surprised when we got notice to quit at the end of this season. It's extremely viable, there's no question. A little bit of a hiccup in the 1 year when we couldn't trade, but that's understandable. But the rest of the time, it's been a successful operation. As to why we've been given leave to quit, I don't know. I don't know the reality of it, but it is ostensibly a betting stadium. It's owned by Entain, which are a very large betting company. So, as I say, I don't know the real reasons, but, I have been given notice to quit, which is within their rights. I have no qualms. I understand that. That's their business. My business has been taken away. But the local authority in particular, the local MP and the West Midlands Mayor have all been very helpful in trying to locate me another site. And we're actively exploring a site probably 5 or 6 miles from where we are now, and the intention is to develop a motorsport stadium. So we still have very high interest in the sport of motorcycle speedway. It's a tremendous family sport. I got involved through my parents taking me. Now on a race night, all my family are involved as well. It's very family conducive. It's and Phil touched on, Mr. Morris, there's no violence, there's no crowd trouble. We don't have a single police official at Wolverhampton Speedway on race nights. So I can only say that Wolverhampton Speedway is not closing because it's not viable.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask you, with your involvement at Wolverhampton, what sort of capacity audience do you normally achieve?
Since COVID, we've had several restrictions put on the stadium, but pre-COVID, in the major playoff finals, we would have pulled 4,000 to 5,000 people on a regular basis.
Post-COVID?
Pardon?
That's pre-COVID. What about post-COVID?
Pre-COVID, those are the figures. The Speedway works to a finale with the major events at the end, and we had to have increased stands, everything put in for the major events because it builds to a finale.
No, okay, all right, thank you very much. Mr. Goatley, anything from you?
Ma'am, in circumstances where I don't have any prior notice what people are going to say, no.
Thank you very much. Okay then, thank you, Mr. Van Stratton. Yes, so the gentleman, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello, my name is Russell Bott. Russell Bott, B-O-T-T.
And who do you represent?
I'm representing the Nuneaton Speedway Supporters Club.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm here to represent the NSSC, which is the Nuneaton Speedway Supporters Club, and also give my views as a Coventry Bees Speedway fan. The NSSC was formed in 1969 as a social club for Speedway fans. We offer regular events featuring guest speakers from all walks of Speedway life. All proceeds from these events are used to support and encourage young British Speedway riders. We work very closely with Neil Vatcher, who is the SCB coordinator and manager of GB Youth Speedway. We sponsor the GB Youth Speedway programme, which currently has 45 riders ranging in age from 8 to 16 years old, and over the last 11 years we have donated nearly £20,000. The NSSC meets twice a month at the Brandon Club, which is just down the road from the stadium. Despite the stadium closing in 2016, our meetings are still as popular as ever and are very well attended, and I can assure you that those present are desperate for Speedway to return to Brandon. My family story will be typical of thousands of Speedway fans, and have been mentioned along the line, who would regularly meet up at Brandon on their favourite spot on the terraces or seat in the stand. Friendships would be formed with familiar faces, and a real sense of community would exist in the safe and friendly environment of a truly family sport enjoyed by all ages in equal measure. My mum used to watch Speedway at Brandon in the early 1950s. My mum and dad then started taking my brother, sister and me in 1970, and my wife and I then took our girls for the first time in 1999. For many years, 3 generations of our family enjoyed meeting at Brandon to enjoy the experience of supporting the Coventry Bees Speedway team. Brandon Stadium is not only of huge historic significance, it also has a unique place in the borough of Rugby as a stadium capable of holding national and international events. It is a venue known throughout the Speedway world and consequently has attracted competitors and spectators not only from all around the country but also across the world. Imagine the uproar if the home of cricket, Lords, fell into the hands of developers who plan to build houses on the site. Well, although not on the same scale, the sense of loss among the Speedway and stock car fans who call Brandon home is just as real. Brandon Stadium is an intrinsic piece of the fabric of the local community, and it should be allowed to remain so. I have so many wonderful memories of Speedway meetings at Brandon, and I believe that future generations deserve the opportunity to make their own memories too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watt. Mr. Goatley, anything? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this juncture? No, as I said before, if anyone does want to make comments as we progress throughout the next this week and next, and I will give the people the opportunity if I'm aware of what they wish to speak about. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation this morning. That's all been very, very helpful to me, and very interesting, some of the comments that I've heard. So, before I just draw this morning's session to a close, this afternoon we're going to undertake our site visit. I just need to make a few arrangements for that. First of all, whereabouts are we going to meet and where can we park? Anyone able to assist me with that?
Mum, we would suggest outside the front by the main gate would probably be the best place. You should be able to not only pull up there, but also be able to park there well off the road.
Right, so that's the main gate where the main entrance, rather than it's to Speedway Lane.
Correct.
The main gate, yeah, with the sign, yeah. Okay, that's fine. In terms of time, I think it takes approximately 25 minutes or so from here. Is that about right? Would you say around about that?
According to Google Maps, 22 minutes.
Depends on the time you take the measurement, doesn't it? Well, thereabouts, yes. And we need to have some lunch as well, obviously. Who's going to accompany me on this visit?
From the
council, Mr. Stevens.
From the appellant, it'll be Mr. Hooper and Mr. Chard.
Right, okay, thank you.
Just so you know, that's Mr. Stevens.
Good afternoon to you, Mr. Stevens.
You haven't met him yet, but...
No, we haven't met yet, but we have now. That's fine. Okay, so in terms of time, as I said, we all need time to get there and time to have a bit of lunch. Should we say 2:15?
Madam, may I just say for SCS that Mr. Carter will be joining you.
That's
and
fine.
also Mr. Jeff Davis.
Right, so how many vehicles? We have enough space for that number of vehicles on the entrance there? Because there's an entrance to a residential property there as well, isn't there, on the corner?
I advise that should be fine.
Right, okay, all right, thank you. In that case then, if everyone's happy with that, we'll meet there at 2:15. And again, tomorrow we are commencing our formal evidence, shall we say, with the Green Belt Roundtable session. We are starting at a slightly earlier time tomorrow at 9:30. So thank you very much, everyone, for today, and I'll see most of you tomorrow and certain parties this afternoon later on. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I'll now draw this morning's session to a close. Thank you.